Poquito, Poquito Podcast. Poquito Podcast. Poquito.
Hello, and welcome back to Un Poquito. I'm Ryan Reyes.
I'm Dominic Angel.
And I'm Rick Macias.
And this week we got back a crowd favorite, the legendary. What can we say about the next guest? She's my mom. Let's start there.
Hey guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming. This is a Mother's Day episode. Are you excited?
I'm excited.
We've had you on a few times. We've told stories about us growing up, you know, stuff about from us from the past. And, you know, this is a Mother's Day episode. And these conversations have been happening a lot more with us surrounding like mental health and therapy and like parenting. And just like as we get older in life, you know, things are changing for all of us. I know for me, you know, I'm in a period of my life right now where like my personal plans and my personal outlook on life is starting to change. So I thought it would be cool to talk a little bit about that, like for us and our journey as a family. Because I do say like, I do think that we've all grown over the years.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's interesting now because before we even started doing podcasting, you know, before we were with Isimo and we had you on there, I reference this every now and then, and I don't think people think it's true, but like we've had a pretty rough relationship. Like everybody has their ups and downs, you know, with their parents, but I think like you know, we've gone through our cycles of arguing a lot and like not having the healthiest relationship. And I do now when I speak about how we are, like people ask me about like my relationship with my mom, or it comes up and I'm always like, yeah, me and my mom are like best friends. Like we're super close now. Like everything's great between me and my mom. But you know, that hasn't always been the case.
Right. I mean, I have my theory. I think that when you guys were growing up, it was really, really hard for me. It was the hardest job I've ever had in my life. There was 4 of you. You were all boys. And I felt like, you know, I worked to support us. I thought it was important to keep you guys involved in something. So you guys were always in sports or in band, and you know, so after work I was still going 100 miles a minute with you guys and coordinating all of that and getting it right and being present was hard. And at the same time trying to raise you guys, it was, you know, just so hard. And so I think I was very strict in the fact, you know, I just didn't think about how I was approaching things. You know, for sure I didn't do things the right way. I just tried to get everything done. And so I remember, you know, I wanted the best for you, obviously. I wanted you guys to do the best for yourselves, and I was hard on you guys. I feel like I was a lot harder on you than I should have been. And I remember distinctively at a certain point, it was Anthony that said, that's it, no more. And he like basically, you know, drew a boundary and said, that's it. You're not doing this anymore. You know, just my going 1,000 miles a minute, you know. And I wasn't prepared for that. I was shocked. I was blindsided. And then you followed suit. And then Ryan, and then Diego, then all of you guys. And then I felt like you all ganged up on me at the same time. And I felt, well, I'm kind of going off here, like not what you had brought up, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Say whatever you have to say.
I felt betrayed at the moment. I felt betrayed at that moment because I thought, this is some bullshit, you know? Like, I just did all this for all these years, but I'm so amazed and happy that you did take a stand for yourselves and you did put a stop to the way I was. And I backed off for probably about a year, and I was so hurt. I was so hurt in my feelings. And I just felt like, I just felt sad, and I just felt like I lost you guys. And then at a certain point, I thought, maybe after about a year, I thought, wait a minute, I'm really going to lose them. Either I let go of my ego, either I brush it off and just, figure it out how to reconnect with you guys, or I lose you guys. And then I thought to myself, does it matter if I'm right? Does it matter if what they think is their reality? So I chose to back off, and I chose to, quit feeling bad. I chose to make a priority of reconnecting.
1 second. Do we want to?
I think they're going downstairs.
Okay.
So the hard part as a mother, once I did come to that realization and I did try to turn it around, you guys were not having it at first.
Yeah. Before we go further into this, I feel like there's a little bit of context that needs to happen, because there's two things that I kind of want to get into. Because I don't know how much of this you want to talk. So anything that you don't want to get too into, you don't have to.
Yeah.
The thing that I want to get to in a second is like this all stemmed around like the formation of the business, and like that's kind of what the precursor for everything was. Like that's where everything reached a boiling point.
Yeah.
And it was like a year or so of like each of us setting up these boundaries over the course of like once that business got started. We were all adults. But before we even get into that, I kind of want to talk about just how we grew up in general. Like I've referenced this a lot, over the years of like realizing that we as a family and you as a mother, and just as a person and the way you grew up, have constantly been in survival mode your whole life.
Yeah.
And so being a single mom and raising four kids, just always having to make sure that thing gets done. And I think we grew up with a sense of like just like urgency, like everything was urgent.
Yeah.
Every decision was a crisis. Like there was a lot of anxiety and stress.
Looking back on it now, I think, gosh, it didn't have to be that rough at all. But getting things done, getting to places on time, getting everything, and raising all of you who were at different stages of your childhood, also trying to figure out what was going on with Ryan, it was a lot. It was so much, and I just wanted to get it done, and it was exhausting. And I could say right now I did the best I could, but I know I could have done better. I know that it didn't have to be that hard. It's just I didn't know how else to do it.
Do you guys have anything?
Not yet.
Okay. To that about the doing the best you could and not knowing better, I want to make it a point to like recognize both sides of that, because like, I think we hear a lot from parents of like not wanting to take accountability, and their response is generally, I did the best that I could, and like wanting you to just accept that. And like, I think there's a sense from a lot of, the kids that are hearing that, that often feel like they're not being, when you say that, you're not being listened to, you're not being heard.
Yeah.
And I do think over the years, like there was a big sense of like, while we were trying to figure stuff out, there was a lot of just like not meeting each other where each of us were at, and not not really listening to each other, because we both wanted to be right about a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure.
And at the same time as being on my side of things is like sometimes there's nothing better that can be said, and so it's like there's the phrase "I did the best that I could" has two different meanings.
Yeah.
And on one end, it's like copping out from responsibility of your actions, but on the other side, it's like for me as a kid, understanding that like you really were doing the best that you could, and you made a bunch of mistakes as a parent, which in retrospect, there's stuff that in my own life I don't even have kids, but there's stuff that looking back it's obvious of like what I could have done or should have done differently, and having to understand that, you know, you being a parent, and now I'm 32, and at every point moving forward in my life since I was in my 20s, I have to think like, damn, my mom had 4 kids at this. Like, shoot, I'm 32 now. In when I'm 36, I remember when I was 18, you were 36, and I thought that was like, oh, that's like older. Like, and then now I'm like, I don't have any kids, and like at that time you had 2 adult children and 2 that were still teenagers, you know. So there's a lot of that stuff of just like trying to understand that side of it as well.
It was a lot. It was crazy. I will say though, even though it was hard, which is like my first, if you ask me, that's going to be my first response, that it was hard, but it was fun. I enjoyed you guys very much when you guys were little, and I so wish it could have lasted longer. You know, I think the biggest regret is working so much. I mean, it's a balance because at the same time I had to support all of you, but then I think, man, I worked so much. You know, my job was very, very flexible with me. I feel like I didn't miss anything. I think I was there for 99% of it, whatever you guys were into. And, you know, I had a work cell phone, so a lot of times I'd be out with you guys somewhere in band or in football or whatever it was you guys were doing, but I had to be answering my phone, you know. So I at the time thought that was a luxury because I could be here with you guys,
right,
and then still be working, you know. So I mean, I like to think of all the happy memories. I like to think about all the fun. You guys were so freaking hilarious since you were little. You guys always made me laugh. You guys were into like really cool music that we were talking about when I walked in, and you guys were so articulate and so you guys were like ahead of your time for sure. You guys were into art. I
got that, Hollywood?
I tell my friends this now, you know, these kids didn't like going to like Disneyland, or they wanted to go to a museum or art gallery, or, you know, and I loved that. So that's what we would do. Yeah, but I thought all of that was a lot of fun. Like I said, Anthony and Dominic were into the sports, which I loved, but then at a certain point, Ryan and Diego were growing up, and then you guys were in sports and band, and when you hit high school, I'm like, you got to choose one. I can't do it, all of that. So then you guys ended up choosing band, and Ryan got into art. So he got into drawing, and he was in like this cartoon writing class, and he was doing that. And then Diego ended up getting into football. He was in orchestra and football, but you guys kept me busy. That's for sure. You kept me really, really busy, and I just wish it would have lasted longer.
There's a lot of stuff from growing up that I also think about, like, I think now it's a lot easier to recognize, like, it was tough. There was a lot of, like, struggle for different reasons, like, not even just on top of dealing with, you know, a single parent household and having 4 kids and having a demanding job. Like, that's its own stress in and of itself. But, like, you know, there's other factors that we know about. Like, there's a lot of, like, traumatic events that happen. but even with everything that we've been through, it's like there is a lot of good, fun memories, and it's easier to see that stuff now because of where I think we are right now, and like being able to communicate. And sometimes we even talk about stuff that was crazy, that was traumatic to us, and we're like, "Damn, can you believe that this happened? Like, can you believe we did this? That's crazy." But like, I remember you always tell us a story about how Chip. Remember Chip? He was the drumline captain in band. He was like 2 years older than me, but he came to pick up his brother from band, and he made a comment because you were sitting in the car like doing working on something. I think it was for band, but you were like waiting to pick us up, and Chip and his girlfriend were like talking to you while you were working, and like he made a comment to his girlfriend that was like, man, it's like she's saying literally like, she's at every single band meetup, band practice, and my parents haven't shown up to anything. Like, I wish they would have shown up to one, you know. So I think there's a lot of stuff that, like, we moved around a lot, but we always went to the same school because you thought it was important for us to like not move away from our friends, you know. And
Well, you know, we have family that we're not very close to. I'm not very close to, for different reasons. We live far from each other.
life changes.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought it's important, at least one thing that we could control, because I worked in the same city, was keeping you guys in the same schools, in the same school district. So I think that was helpful to me as a parent because everybody knew you guys. Everybody knew you guys, and it just made it easier, you know. Not to keep tabs on you, but kind of just kind of, you know, make sure you guys were okay.
I think one thing that's been interesting, and I think this is kind of part of any family dynamic, is that transition between parent and like children and like adult and adult. Like, I think that also affects how people communicate and how that changes over time, because, you know, we'll still always be your kids, just like you're always like grandma's kids, and then
You're always our mom.
yeah, and you're always our mom, but at the same time, like, how we communicated was affected by us acknowledging, not only, you know, you acknowledging us as adults, but us kind of remembering that you're not just our mom. You're like also a whole person outside of being our mom. And I think there was some funny moments during that, like, transition. Like, I think 2 years ago, so you used to take us to a lot of art events, and I think 2 years ago, Anthony was visiting because he lives out of state. And so you were trying to find something for all of us to do. And that month, the immersive Van Gogh exhibit was hitting Los Angeles. So we coordinated as fast as we could because it was like the last weekend that it was going to be there.
And Anthony was only here for a short period.
And he was only here for like a day, maybe two, and then he was like immediately going back. So we got tickets for, I think, like the next day.
Yeah.
And so what was funny about this is, from my mom's perspective, she's just trying to plan a family day, something that's fun and new for all of us to do, that we can do together. From my perspective, I am very specifically a fan of Van Gogh. I've talked about it before. Something that's affected my ability to get better at art is that my hands, I have a coordination issue when it comes to my hands because I have a severe stigmatism in my right eye. It affects not only what activities my right hand is dominant in, but how long it can remain dominant, because when I'm drawing, my brain is trying to aim with the left side, and so my hand like twitches, and it makes it hard to make long standing like designs. I have to hatch at them.
And if I could just interject real quick. For those of you who don't know, Ryan's legally blind in his right eye because he has a damaged cornea.
Yeah, and it causes
there's no way to repair it.
Yeah, it causes a consistent stigmatism that can't go away. So because of all that, the effect of it is that my style is very sketchy, like I used hash lines instead of full lines. So my work is very similar to Van Gogh's style. He used dashes and hash work, even in his paintings. And so to see like that someone could make... I always resonated with Van Gogh in that way, because that means that I could still learn how to do better in design work given the disability that I had in drawing. So Van Gogh has always been my favorite artist, even since high school. But I don't talk about it that much. So my mom had no idea. And when you combine that with me being autistic and it being an immersive event, like they coordinate these images with music and they animate them so that you feel like you're in the artwork. So we get to the event and we actually got there early. So we're getting there right before it ends. And they let us walk in. So we walk in right at the Starry Night one, and I immediately am overwhelmed. I have a panic attack. But not for a bad reason. It's because
it was like an emotional...
Yeah, it was like I was overwhelmed by how much his art affected me. Not only like the history I have with his art, but like literally being able to be in the painting.
It really did make you feel like you were in the painting.
Yeah, and this overwhelmed me. I started crying. I needed to be by myself, so I sat separately. And what was funny about this moment is, going back to my mom's perspective, she's trying to do this as a family outing. So I'm having this what's the word? Esoteric? I'm
I don't
having
know what you're trying to say.
like a moment, like an epiphany, like a individual moment in my... connecting to my childhood till now. And while I'm crying and looking at all these images, I hear, "Psst, Ryan, psst." And I look, and my mom's trying to get me over here. Let me take a picture for Instagram. And it was a really funny moment. Because you could see where our perspectives were just colliding on accident.
I love to take pictures. I love to... take pictures with you guys in particular, and I feel so lucky that you guys indulge me, because lots of people don't want to take pictures with their mom, but you guys do every time, and that makes me happy.
I'm listening to your guys' experience growing up, and how hard all this can be, and the thing that stuck out to me is kind of like what Ryan was saying about how it kind of has to go both ways, where you acknowledge the other adult and the adult in each other as your roles start to change. And it's interesting because my family had their ups and downs too, and my mom had a lot of kids, and quite a few of us, she had to deal with us being mad at her too. Some of it's very understanding, she had a hard life, but it's also it's interesting that I guess I can't say this is all moms, but she let us be mad. And she had a level of patience that, looking back on, is very surprising.
That's big.
Yeah.
That's, for a mother, that is huge and not easy to do.
No. And it's it's something you start to realize as you get older, that's... takes some strength, because
something that you may have not realized then.
Yeah,
it's a huge deal.
Yeah,
to think about what she was going through to allow you to have your moment. I can just relate to her. Yeah, because I wasn't good at that. I wasn't good at letting them be mad until later, until they, set their boundaries for me. Yeah. But if she did that, that was a huge thing on her behalf.
Yeah, I think she had some practice, but
she had a couple tries.
One of the younger?
I'm one of the younger ones. Yeah. But even so, that doesn't mean you're going to be good at it. Doesn't mean it's easy. In fact, it's almost harder because it keeps happening.
Yeah.
Happens,
My God, it does. And for me, I've said this, I was a much better parent to Ryan and Diego than I was to Anthony and Dominic. I was way too young with Anthony and Dominic, and they had to become the parent when they were 6 and 8 years old.
Yeah.
So, I remember back then, I remember Anthony and Dominic just looking at me like, I can't believe you let them get away with that, And now, when they got old, when they all got older, I had to explain to Ryan and Diego, you guys have no idea what they went through. It's like the reverse of them not understanding the dynamics, It's just that they went through a lot more that you didn't have to go through. So I just remember a couple years ago having to explain that to Diego in particular. But I always remember, like, I used to be so strict with Anthony and Dominic about grades. And then by the time Ryan and Diego came, I didn't care as much about grades. I was like, I would be like, Ryan, how are you doing? Well, Anthony and Dominic got straight A's for the most part. If they weren't doing well, they were getting a B- in something, and I'd push them to get that A again. But by the time Ryan and Diego came, there was so much more going on. And I remember I'd be like, Ryan, how are your grades? And he'd be like, I got my grade up to a D. And I'd be like, good, right on. And then he'd be like, that is some bullshit. It's just...
But also, Ryan was dealing. The thing is, like, you start to learn the complexities of every situation too.
Yes.
Like, Ryan had a hard time in school because he had to deal with more severe autism. But it affected me in different ways, I think. And it just is. It's like, it's hard when we all grew up so young together.
Yeah.
Like, obviously you're young when you grow up.
But I was young too at the same time.
We were all very young, and like, you feel things more, and I think, like, it's hard to see the side of anyone, especially when you don't have the tools. One thing that really did help us is that we have all been to therapy differently, and it's been most effective when it's been on our own terms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, we all bring our individual experiences to an evolving conversation.
And part of what has helped us too is, like, just speaking. We don't even speak about the stuff that we've experienced, like the issues. Like, we do have those conversations, and those are important to have, but we just have conversations about therapy and communication in general, about, like, how is an effective way for all of us to communicate with each other. Like, those conversations, I think, are what have helped the most, because we've all gone to therapy, and, like, we've learned to set boundaries, and we learned this and that, and, like, it happens less and less, but there was more. But I remember there was a time where Anthony came to visit, and, like, I won't get into the details of everything, but I blew up on him. Like, something happened, it triggered me, and I fucking lost it on him. And, like, I was yelling, and he kept his cool. Anthony's like the kind of the example for all of us of, like, he's the best. He's done a lot of work on himself, but just as a family, like,
we have him to thank for us saving us, really.
I mean, I think so too.
He removed himself away from us, and that was huge. That was huge. And I don't know, it was so hard for me. I couldn't believe he was leaving me, but it had to happen. It had to happen, and he did it. He did it for himself, and he did it for us.
And it wasn't even like, we've all lived close. Like, not, sorry. I think it was a good example of just the fact that there are alternatives to
yelling.
Yes.
But, like,
well,
the
really,
alternative, like, I think he was the oldest, so I feel like it kind of couldn't happen another way. He had to be the example of hard boundaries so that we could learn how to communicate through, through those boundaries. Not like in the sense of, like, taking them away, but acknowledging them in a more becoming comfortable talking about stuff like that, so that it wasn't always such a struggle on both sides to like just be around each other.
It also just took me a while to understand that how we did communicate as a family at back then, which was by fighting. And it's like you're fighting all the time, but it's like you don't know that that's not healthy or that that's not necessarily like normal or typical. Like that's not how a family should be. But it took me a while to realize like that's just what we thought was normal. Like was just like getting into yelling matches. Yeah,
and I've come to like sort of you hear that from an outside perspective, and it's hard to comprehend like, well, how is someone just comfortable with fighting as communication? And I think people misunderstand. It's not that we were comfortable only talking through fighting. It's that when we weren't engaging or when we didn't have to engage with each other, we didn't. So there was only one correlation. Like we, not only were we living separate lives in the same household, but that association became when we're around each other, we were like annoyed.
Yeah, there's a lot of
like
different.
Definitely a very passionate family. And yeah, it's taken me a long time to understand that that's not the way you communicate effectively.
But also, it's just like a thing. I think people think that. Not that I don't think people necessarily think these things explicitly, but I think there's just a general like subconscious acceptance of like the way that you express frustration, the way that you express like that you're angry is to just yell. And that's a symptom of being angry.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily like the example I'll give is like I think I've told this on the podcast before, but when I used to drive for Access, I picked up some guy and I had a hard time finding his pickup location because it didn't match up to the directions that he gave didn't match up to the directions that I was getting from this app that we use, and so we kept missing each other. And finally, like we found each other. I go and pick him up, and he's like, "Where were you?" I've been trying to flag you down. I told you. I said it, but he was mad, and he's like, ah, and I was like, okay. Like, I'm just like whatever. In those moments, especially at work at the time, I was just like, if they want to yell, whatever. And then like as we were driving, we were in traffic, and he's like huffing and he's like, ugh. Like mad at the traffic, like just angry. He gets a phone call and he's talking to somebody and he's like, yeah, they were late and I'm on my way now. We're in fucking traffic, and he's mad. And then we're in traffic for an hour. I don't say a word to him. And then finally I drop him off and he's like, all right, thanks, man. I'll see you later. Like, thanks for the ride. And it was like
just how he expresses
just how
himself.
People express themselves is like,
because I think for the most part, we would have like a full on, what would seem like a blow up, but we weren't really hating each other. We weren't really mad at each other. Sometimes then we'd go to dinner. And we would have a nice dinner,
I mean, it would take some cool down period for sure. There's a thing. It's also, honestly, it feels so silly to be angry.
It does.
Like, especially like when you're yelling at somebody and then you reach a resolution, you feel silly afterwards.
You're like, I guess I don't have to face this corner anymore.
Yeah. It's embarrassing. Like that transition period of things being okay is so embarrassing to be like.
Right.
So
I remember, I don't know if it was a comedian or if it was something I got off the internet, but someone once said, you can never stay angry while trying to explain why you're angry because it always sounds silly.
Yeah. I was trying to write a joke. I said it on the podcast already, right? The best way to win an argument is to apologize sincerely.
Yeah, you've definitely said that. No, I do definitely relate to some of the stuff you guys are talking about for sure, because like I especially the point of living alone together, like those things are very real, and I've definitely experienced that. And my family would do very similar things. There'd be like shouting matches and stuff, and then eventually be like, you want food? No apology, but like, you want food?
Yeah.
You hungry?
Yeah.
I have some leftovers for you. Yeah, and I do relate to all that, but I think part of the yelling stuff is because when you do live alone together, like you're kind of living your own separate lives, like you're talking about, there is no connection in those moments. There's like hours and days where there isn't a connection, and you're right next to each other, and sometimes fighting is the substitute for that connection, to have some, a connection, some intimacy, even if it's not the healthiest version.
It just is like that's the last thing that you kind of carry with your relationship. Like, I feel like, because like the kind of what Ryan was saying, because I feel like with us, that's just how we learned how to solve problems, was by yelling at somebody, because we thought the loudest, I mean, not to
Would
speak for
make their point
the
across.
loudest would be the most correct, right? And like, I think, not to speak for my mom, but I think there was a lot of desperation being a single mom, being so young, having a high pressure job, and then having 4 kids that didn't always listen to you, feeling like the only way to like get them, to scare them into listening is to yell, or stuff like that. So it just is like, that's what you subconsciously think is how you solve problems. And then the only times that we'd have to interact with each other were like making plans for, like, even if it was planning to go have lunch together, nobody could agree, or somebody wasn't answering their phone, probably me. But it was just like simple things like that. It could be something as simple as planning a lunch or having an emergency, and we all have to figure it out. And the other thing, and this is something that I learned through therapy and through talking to Anthony, was as a family, we were always in this like, it was essentially a rotation of everybody's sinking and one person is keeping everybody afloat. And it was like a rotating thing of like, but because of that, the person that was keeping everybody afloat, they can't succeed. Like, they can't pull themselves out of water. So again, Anthony, we should have him on and talk about these things.
You really should.
He was the first one to be like, I'm sorry, but like, I have to do this on my own. I have to build a life for myself. And look, before this goes any further, I want to say, like, we all have a great relationship. Like, and even with Anthony, like, he lives out of state, but we're very close still, because of all of this. So like,
it was like I was saying earlier, was like, it was more just an example that we don't have to force ourselves to be in the same room all the time just to have that relationship. It can exist in space.
Exactly.
No matter what we've had going on. And I think the way that we handle things, the way that I expressed myself, and the way that I got things done in the home, I think at never could I say we were not close. We were always close. There was always a lot of love. And, it's just learning how to have that respect, for each other. Because one thing is, you guys had each other's back. And I'll say this to my friends sometimes. They'll take a bullet for each other and throw me in the way to shield themselves. And,
It's called trauma bonding.
they really are. I'm just so blessed that you guys are so close and that you guys have each other's back. Like, the bond between, I know all 4 of you are close, but between you and Diego and you and Anthony, it's just amazing. It's an amazing thing for me, and I wouldn't have it in any other way.
I'm actually glad you brought that part up, because that was something that I was thinking about when you were talking about how we each individually like learned to communicate, because I feel like there was 2 kind of major things that had to happen before we could reach this level of like understanding with each other. One of them was that, we all had to acknowledge each other as individuals. But the second thing was I specifically had issues with communication. I had to learn how to understand what I wanted to convey before I could convey it. And I think that something that was always different between me and Dominic was that he got good at that early on and I didn't. I would say I wasn't good at that until recently, like relatively recently, like honestly till we started stand-up together. Because not only did that give us something to bond over, but that gave me the skills to communicate better, like in regular life.
Yeah, it's huge. You've come a long way, Ryan. And if I can just say this, Ryan is the only one that I went to therapy with when he was in high school. And I still talk to people my age and around my age and a little bit older. They don't really understand. A lot of them still don't understand autism, and they don't understand that the dynamic of it really. And I just last night was having a conversation with someone who said that his nephew had very similar characteristics of those that I was describing of you, early on, like in high school.
Right.
And he said that his brother would be really hard on him. Still, And one of the things, this is for anybody out there that this can help, even if it's just one person. I went to therapy with Ryan, and the therapist had such a great outlook and really taught me how to understand you, this was just like life-changing, because later it helped me understand your brothers too, even though it didn't have anything to do with that. But understanding you and understanding that it's just not that big of a deal, Whatever I was stressing out about, whatever I was just freaking out about, was it really that life-changing? Was it really that big of a deal? And when I would stop to think of each of those times, it wasn't. So I say to those parents that don't understand their child's dynamic, therapy will be really helpful. I think that the therapist did kind of help Ryan, but really the therapist helped me understand, and that changed everything. It changed. That's when we started, getting all the knowledge we could about autism, and it really just changed our lives for the better. And then after that, we got into the program where you would have social experiments, and that was really good and helpful. So my advice is get as much information as you possibly can, because I think it's heartbreaking. Like last night, the conversation I was having, it's heartbreaking to know that people still don't understand it and they're being hard on them just because they don't know how to approach
Right.
or react to their child that has autism.
Coming from a different generation,
Yeah.
how do you think that being Latino influenced how you grew up and how you raised us? Do you think there's a difference between that, or was it just more of a familiar, just having the difference of experiences and knowing the things that you wanted to do differently, and how you viewed your own parenting?
My generation is the generation that first learned how to be on the internet way back when. And so I'd like to think I'm definitely very old school, but at the same time, we were modern too, to a certain point. And I think that being Latino on top of that was different because it wasn't as, I think there's a lot more representation now. There was none back then. There was so little back then. And so growing up, in my household, I grew up in a single mom household too. And it was just, I don't know. It's hard to say, and this is going to be hard for me to spit out, because as much as I didn't get along with my mom at all, and as much as I wanted to think I was different, I would never be like her. I would never raise my kids like she raised us. And shit, you know, I can't even take it back now. It happened the same way, you know. It literally happened the same way, and it's a hard reality. I got to tell you, a lot of times when these kids remind me of things that I did or how I handled something, it's very hurtful. It's very hurtful to hear it, that's what I did. And it's very, you know, I feel bad. I feel embarrassed. I feel, you know, disappointed in myself because of the way I handled certain things. And, you know, the sad truth is history does repeat itself. The one thing I could say that I really, really made a change is when you guys were making the changes in your lives, I needed to change that. If not, I was going to lose my family. If not, I was going to lose my, you know, my kids. And one thing I feel like I have always tried to make you guys feel like you could trust me. You can tell me whatever you need to tell me. I'm not going to judge you. No matter how uncomfortable it is. And shit, sometimes you guys told me things I didn't want to know. But be careful what you wish for. But, you know, I'm very happy that you guys feel comfortable. You know, all of you have had something in your lives that have been very private, and that I can't believe you're sitting there telling me or talking to me about it.
Bees.
And we got through it. You got through it. And, you know, I don't know. I kind of went off on a tangent, you know, in a different direction. But I think going back to the Latino part of it, you know, I think now you have more representation. You have a lot more confidence. I think this generation of young people, you know, your guys' generation, your age group, I think they have way more confidence than we did. I think that's huge. And a lot of you guys don't have kids.
Yeah, you remind me of that constantly.
It's so funny because when the kids were little, I would tell them, you know, don't have kids, do not have kids. I didn't want them to suffer like I did, you know. And I would tell them, you know, don't just trust these girls. They like to, you know, tell you things, and they'll tell you they're on birth control, whatever. I would say just think twice about it. And now so much time's passed, and I'd be like, when are you guys gonna have kids? It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, right.
Bees.
Bees.
You know what's funny? This is completely unrelated, but just because you brought up bees.
Damn it. Fuck.
I had to wait downstairs earlier, and by happenstance, 2 amateur bee collectors were in line at the coffee shop downstairs, and they spent the entire time that they were there talking about bees, how to handle bees, new techniques to capture the queen. And I was like, all right, I get it. It's a lot. Like, after 10 minutes, I was like, shut up about bees already.
Did you tell them about vulture bees?
No, I didn't want to get involved.
You didn't want to start that conversation. I had a question for you, Ricky. So, in your upbringing, did any of your siblings act like as your parent?
Oh yeah, it was like a cascade of parenting.
Oh man.
So like the oldest brother kind of did it. My oldest sister did a lot too, specifically. And yeah, there was a lot of that. Like my brother above me was more of a dad than any of my brothers, and he wasn't even that much older. He was like 5 years older than me.
That's pretty big.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Huh?
That's a pretty big.
That's the difference
age.
between millennial and Gen Z.
No,
Yeah.
I know, but like I would listen to him like he was a dad. So then
Whoa, I
friends,
see what you're saying.
the friends would be like, "What?" And I'm like, "You don't get it. Like, it's weird, but you don't." It makes sense here for now.
It was
Yes.
the same for me.
Yeah.
But with my sister, she's 5 years older
Yeah.
than me.
So like he would be the dad, and then in some ways like I would kind of be the dad to my younger siblings, and it's like, but not fully, you know. But there was like this, like, you know, like I said, a cascade of it, and some people took on different roles or longer longer time amounts of time in those roles, but also just like it's never quite the same because you're all living the same experience in wildly different positions.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that did happen. And it's like, this could be like so many episodes if I ever dive into this. I'd probably have to dive in with them anyway. But yeah, it is complicated, but also it was normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it totally was. That's how I feel these kids were. Anthony and Dominic took on the parental role of Ryan and Diego. And you don't mean for that to happen. It just happens. And, it's heartbreaking because their kids should never be put in that position.
I was bad at it.
Yeah, the younger...
Like, I still...
You want to buy some candy?
Like, I was good at learning how
to
get
draw
around things. No, like I was kind of a bad influence on Diego. We were always coordinating. It wasn't just how the four of us were, but it was like us and our cousins. The age groups formed in such a way that I was always kept in the younger side. So even though I was the oldest of that group, I wasn't like I don't know if that makes sense. I wasn't like the leader. I was just part of that group. And so it was like, instead of aging into that role, into that persona, that's how I saw Diego, was just like my best friend. So like instead of making sure he was staying out of trouble, I was like teaching him how to get in trouble. Like we would figure out scheme. Like we used to borrow. I say borrow. We used to steal my mom's laundry tokens, and we would sneak under like the school. We found holes in the school fencing. I found holes in the school fencing, and we would buy candy from the soccer games. And then we'd sneak back, and I showed him how to hide it, and eventually led to him hiding like a year's worth of candy in our car once. It got ants. It was bad. Or like it was never. I was also really short. Like. My brothers talk about bringing home groceries when they were 5, and I was always too short. I would drag the bags, and the milk always exploded. So just like I was never that for my little brother. I was always bad at it. We were just like the same.
But also it's like me and Anthony were that. You didn't have to be because we were that.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about it before, but like having such a big family and so many siblings, like
how many siblings do you have?
There's 10 of us. There's 5 boys and 5 girls.
Wow.
What is your experience? Because there's 5 of us. There's 6 with my dad, but we mostly grew up together and we were always around each other. So for the 5 of us, that's a lot of people to have to work through things with. Like, how's that been for you with such a wide range of ages?
Yeah, like that's a process. Like it's still happening. Like it's way better than ever before, but it's still like, like imagine like some people like, every family has their story, but then you're like, you have to like tie up loose ends or resolve things with people, and it's like, or don't. Like that's always a choice too, right? And it's interesting in that like it can be really hard to do it when it feels like there's a lot of people to do it with, because to start you're kind of alluding to like processing things with people in your family and stuff. Like for me, I'll speak for myself. It was hard to do it at all because then it meant once I start it, there's a whole list to go through. It's like, damn, do I really want to go through this with 8 other people? How long is this going to take? A few months or a whole year?
Yeah.
Or a few years? And it's like, man, like, and I procrastinate, that's part of me. But I think eventually, I mean, you just have to do that stuff, right? Or don't. But for me, I started to do that stuff. and it's helpful. Like it just makes everyone better, and it makes things easier. I think over time.
I think it's hard because being the first person in a family to do that is hard. I don't know if you were the first, but it is hard being the first. I know from Anthony's, it can be very isolating because I don't know if he did it in hopes that we would all follow suit. I know that once you do therapy and you start to work on things, you want to share that with everybody. But you're doing it for yourself, and so it's scary because you can like be isolated from your family because it's like everybody can turn on you. And luckily for us on our in our story, I'm very grateful that we all kind of saw what he was doing and saw the benefits that it had, and like we're doing it on our own. Yeah. And followed suit essentially, and now we're in a much better position.
Yeah, because technically I think, I haven't corroborated it fully, but I'm pretty sure I was the first one in my family to go to therapy. I'm the 8th out of 10.
Well, at least it stuck. At least.
Yeah, at least it stuck. So like I feel like I started it, but my younger, like Anthony was the guy to kind of like change a lot for your family, right? Mm. So I was the one to like make it cool or okay, kind of okay. Because at first, like when I went, there was like whispers of like, oh, like he's going to therapy. Like, yeah. And this is when I was like, I'm 35 now, but this is when I was like 24 when I first started going. And it was very like cursory, like early starts of facing things. But my youngest sister went away, like Anthony did, and she was the first one to go away for like a long period of time and for school, and she did a lot of work, and she lived in the Bay Area for a while, so when she finally came back, she was kind of like Anthony, she like boundaried, boundaried up and everything, yeah. So like she was the main catalyst, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, like, for us, bringing Anthony again, when Anthony really kind of reiterated, not only verbally, but just by his actions, you have to focus on yourself. If you start with yourself, I think that's huge. And for me, giving them their moment, giving them their space, that was huge for me to have to learn how to do. And as much as I always try to look out for them, as far as like I try to look out because they didn't have their dad in the home, and growing up like that, I thought, man, I felt really bad about that. And so I always tried to have male role models in their life, their coaches or their teachers, but at the same time I wasn't giving them that, and that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing for me to face and to admit and to, think about. But I find it easier to talk about now because we're all doing so much better.
Yeah.
And, it gets easier.
Yeah, it does get easier, and I think that's normal. Like you just put a lot of pressure on yourself because you do want to be everything, and you can't.
Yeah,
you can't. It's impossible, and it's gonna be okay because, we all sought out role models anyway. You can't give your kids everything, even if they had a dad, that was around. Because I would just seek role models. It's not perfect, but I would have teachers I would reach out to, And even if the kids aren't going to do that, they have to learn to reach out to other people beyond you anyway, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so
I just had this thought in my head. Everyone talks about the first to go to college. No one talks about the first to go to therapy. Have that doctorate on the wall.
I think it's still such a huge thing for Latinos, especially like I said, maybe my generation and older. It's like a big deal, and still like something embarrassed to talk about. And I don't know, it's just I don't know how many conversations I've had with people, and I always think about this has happened to me more and more often. I'm hanging out with someone, or I'm talking to someone, or I'm getting to know someone, and they either have kids or nephews or someone in their family that clearly is autistic, and they have no idea.
Yeah.
They have no idea, and they're just talking about this bad behavior and how this kid's always giving them a hard time. So last night, again, I'll bring it last night, I was having this conversation, and I was just sitting there listening to him, and I said, based on what you've just told me, you have no idea how big this kid's comprehension is. Like, he's not going to tell you. And visibly, he doesn't look like he's understanding you. But he's paying attention to every single word you're saying. And the level, his mind's level is just beyond what you can imagine. And he was just sitting there like, yeah. Yeah, it's true. But, you know, Latinos for therapy. You know, a lot of people are against medication. And, you know, way back when, probably in the 90s, the very first time I saw a couple, it was friends of your dad and I, and they'd come over a couple times. I think your dad worked with the husband. And so they'd come over and they'd hang out with us sometimes. And they had a son that was about 9 years old, which way older than you guys at the time. Mm-hmm. And at a certain time, they had to give him some medicine. He was autistic, and I don't know what's the right term, Ryan. I don't want to say it the wrong way. He was like higher on the spectrum.
Low or high support needs.
Yes. And so, you know, he had these behaviors that, and the parents, it was a young couple, they were really embarrassed about it. And they were like looking at us like, how are we going to react? But we were just fine. And he'd get a shoe and like throw it, and it'd land on the table, you know, and we would just start laughing and take it off, you know, no big deal. But at a certain point, they give him some medication. It was like 8 o'clock, time for meds. And he just his demeanor changed. His lively little self was gone, and he would start drooling, and she would, you know, be fighting him physically until he just knocked out. And I remember, to me and your dad, that was so heartbreaking, and I thought, I never want to put my kids on medication. I don't ever want to take medication, and that's not the case. It's not like that. There's medication that helps your moods. Obviously, there's lots of herbal remedies. Being in the tea business, I've learned so much about it that you don't even have to get on medications. But I'm all for trying to make you feel better, trying to make yourself feel better. And I'm not talking about taking, you know, illegal drugs. I'm talking about, you know, if there's a mild, you know, mood enhancing prescription or some herbal remedy that would, you know, benefit you, go for it, because we deserve to be happy. We should all have peace. We should all deserve happiness. And I think in the Latino community, the lack of or the, what's the word I'm trying to say, the, you know, questionable, you know, maybe they don't want to take the prescription, or they think it's something really bad, or they're not okay if they go to therapy. And I think, man, we need to get rid of that in the Latino community. We need to realize that how good it is for you, especially if you've had a rough upbringing or a, you know, difficult situation. And sometimes that's what you got to do.
Thank you. Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
Happy Mother's Day.
Thanks for coming through. Thanks for joining us on the pod. We always get such good feedback. People like listening to what you have to say.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you being part of the community. Yeah, this has been a great episode. It's been a fun time. Ryan, do you have any final questions if they've made it this far?
What's your relationship with your sibling now?
Just trauma dump in the comment section if you want.
That's what YouTube is for.
Yeah. Thanks for being.
Can I say something? I'm so sorry that I didn't bring this up earlier, but I just want to give a shout out to my mom.
Yeah.
Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Thank you for everything. As many of you know, I've said many times I don't have a great relationship with my mom. We had a very, very hard relationship growing up, but she was definitely a great mother as far as, you know, being a provider and taking care of us, making sure we were safe. It's just that our personal relationships with each other has not been great, but we do try. We do talk every so often, and I know that she tries to make an effort. So I think it's never too late. I think that we might never be the normal relationship of a mother and daughter, but I appreciate everything that my mom has done for me, and I just wanted to tell her thank you.
Awesome.
And we appreciate you. And that's the new call to action this week. Call your mom.
Yeah.
Shout out to everyone's mom.
Leave your
Yes.
mom's phone number in the comment section so that we can call her.
Let's call your mom. We'll appreciate it.
I think it's so. For me, it's important to try to get along with my mom. And we're doing the best we can.
Mom,
That's
I
all
love
we
you, but we
can
gotta
do.
go.
Bye.
And that's all we can do. So from us at Un Poquito,
Don't fly.